question. Aiming for momentary muscular failure and engaging fast twitching muscle fibers. The recovery process is concentrated on creating new, slow, or fast twitching fibers. That's a good question.
You are on fire.
That's a good question. Jerome can go first in this one.
Sure. I think, if I remember correctly, I think the term is hyperplasia, which would be the creation of actually new muscle fibers. And I don't think that we're actually creating new fibers when we are building muscle. I think we're just making the ones we have bigger. So the way that I would look at answering this question is, to the extent that you fatigue muscle fibers of different types through what you do with your resistance training, those are the fibers that are recovering and becoming bigger and stronger. Now, there's some plasticity with the more intermediate type fibers, and depending on the type of activity you're regularly engaging in, they can skew more towards slow twitch or fast twitch. But the other thing to keep in mind is muscle fibers are recruited based on need. So whatever you are doing, your body only recruits as many muscle fibers as necessary to perform that task. And it recruits the slow twitch muscle fibers first. This is Henneman's size principle, which is also known as the principle of orderly recruitment. And until you fatigue those slow twitch muscle fibers, that's when you start recruiting the more intermediate and eventually the fast twitch muscle fibers. So if you're training close to or to momentary muscle failure, you're probably recruiting all of the slow and fast twitch fibers that you're capable of volitionally recruiting. And then your recovery is going to make the slow twitch, intermediate twitch, and whatever fast twitch you recruit, it's going to make those fibers bigger and stronger.
Yeah, I think the same. You rightly say it goes from slow to fast twitch. Now this goes back to something I brought up, I think, once or twice before, actually, in my underhand lat pull down video, where I sort of shown you guys, a few reps. So I think I did like 10 reps or something. I said, don't worry about the weight I used or the reps I used. The most important factor is the last point. So the last few reps I'm doing. So you saw that my speed, so the slow twitch muscle fibers in my underhand pull down video were maximally recruited, burnt out, at least to the point that they weren't able to fulfill the task of continuing to pull the weight down. So at that point, the fast twitch muscle fibers then begun to become more active. Now these are like, think of it as like gears to a car. So you've got gear 1, or you're parked, gear 1, gear 2. So each gear up you go, the faster the muscle fibers that are activated, the faster twitch muscle fibers are more so activated. So when you're at that top tier, that's when they're all recruited, theoretically. Now we can't actually recruit all of them, because by that point the weight would probably squash us. That's why Jerome and I recently had this conversation about not liking the idea of total muscular failure, because it means that you'd tear something, and because you can never get to 100%. You can put 100% effort in, but your body will find a way to stop you. So through production of excess lactic acid, fatigue, cardiovascular fatigue, something will happen which stops you. Your grip will go, your footing will go. Something will happen which stops you lifting more weight, or your joints will snap. Something will always happen. Now, I think that in regards to this question, it will happen simultaneously, because your body wants to adapt from the stresses that you're putting on it. So, I'm not sure which one of the two. Well, there's more than two muscle fibers. There's probably hundreds of individual variations between each individual one. But I'm not sure which kind of is the most resource intensive. It's one of those questions, like a theoretical question, not so much something we'd use and find a way of applying into our field of muscular training. I really don't think there's a straightforward answer other than your body will adapt to the stress that you put on it. That's basically it. People are always concerned about building fast twitch muscle fibers. It sounds good, like, you want to be fast twitch like Usain Bolt, but I don't think there's much you can do to really change them to that great of an extent. Like if we look across the board in most, perhaps like a muscle biopsy dissection kind of things, they'll take a muscle fiber apart and say, this is 50% slow, 50% fast twitch. I think the triceps are around about that sort of amount, maybe 40, 60, something like that. Problem there is it's different for every muscle group. You might realize that, for example, the soleus muscle groups it begins at the kneecap and goes down to the ankle effectively. So that's like the bottom bit that you see in your calf. It goes all the way up to your knee, but it's, that's the soleus anyway. That would be predominantly slow twitch because it's a muscle that you're using almost to a lower degree. It's got a lot of endurance to it. Use it for walking. It's not something, we're not animals that just sit there then sprint all the time. We walk around, we do stuff like that. So that's why we have that muscle fiber composition there. Now we've got the gastrocnemius, which has got a high proportion of fast twitch muscle fibers. So that's more useful for like extending up to like reach something or jumping for something. There's different variations between each muscle group. With all that said, the variation between each muscle group is so vast that we'll never really be able to truly just train one without training the other, So it's always going to be slow to fast. And the way we get more fast twitch muscle fibers is to train really hard, as Jerome and I have pointed out in every video pretty much. And it's concentric muscular failure if you can get to that point. And just aim for good recovery. So you've rightly found out that your legs get very sore and it takes a long time to recover. So that means as your coach, I'm going to look at your training program and think, okay, is he sort of tapering the point of not recovering enough? Or then look at your measurements, your strength levels in the gym. If you're hitting benchmarks in your strength, then I think carry on as you are. Mm-hmm. But then if you're saying, oh, my legs are really sore and I can't walk around or do work or something, which affects your life, then I might look at decreasing your training frequency. What do you think, Sophie?
Pretty much the same as you guys, really.
Brilliant. You have to. You have to agree.
I'm not an expert on it yet.
Speculating out loud on the whole idea that our bodies kind of have a number of neurological safeguards in place. We can override things like our stretch reflex when, if we try to bend over and touch our toes and our hamstrings, our lower back gets tight. If we hold that position comfortably and don't force it, we'll override our nervous system to where it'll allow for a little bit more ability. And over time, most individuals can develop a certain degree of hypermobility, at least in certain ways with muscle and connective tissue, not so much if there's like a bony joint limitation. But I tend to think because of that, we can probably somewhat override some of those safeguards that are in place to let us gradually recruit small increments amount of muscle over time. I don't think it's enough that's ever going to take anybody who has a relatively small frame and is predominantly slow twitched and make them have this Herculean looking physique. But I so firmly believe, and maybe I just naively want to believe, that if we're training hard enough, we are able to have our best gains as men, and able to maintain most of our muscle mass, I think, well into our mid 60s, maybe even 70, if we're training safely and properly and with enough intensity. The problem is, even looking at my own workouts, and I work out as hard as I can, and I push those sets really, really hard. But if we're really looking at something like momentary muscular failure, those are largely reserved for life and death situations. So while I think we can have a small influence over it, I mean, the amount of just leg days that I feel like I've really, really hit actual muscle failure is still probably, I can only count it on one hand. It's been a handful of times in the 20 years that I've been training that I really thought this set I've really taken all the way to failure. But that's just me rambling. Any thoughts on that, Jonathan? Sophie?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of thinking the same, really. Does like leg workouts? Yeah, like I can take a leg extension to failure. It's not very taxing. I mean, it burns, it really hurts.
Yeah.
Like if we've ever done negatives with someone, yeah, that's pretty much a failure when you can't move anymore, when your leg's just shaking. I actually trained my adductors today prior to doing leg extensions, and that was a bad idea. So I'd never actually got my thighs to what's the word, fatigue properly through my leg extensions because my adductors were so tired. Like my legs were shaking on the inside, like, you know, the inside of your groin. So I was lifting the weights up and it's like, that's not working. I really seriously messed that one up. So I put that exercise in the wrong position in my workout. I just wanted to try it and I wanted to warm up and pre-exhaust as much as possible before any sort of loading movements, and that kind of backfired. But yeah, I'd say, you know, training to failure of legs, like, you know, the concentric, isometric, the eccentric failure is really tough. Really tough. Your body doesn't like doing it. It will probably make you feel sick as well.
I think you've said as well, you can't really train to, is it concentric failure with squats? Is it concentric?
I think eccentric. Yeah. And you can do if you have
if you got like a spotter around
or a spotter.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't really use an exercise like that just because it's so unsafe. Like Ronnie Coleman did it. He think he did like 800 pounds for 2 reps or something. But even then, you look at him thinking that could easily snap his back. I'd not be surprised if that night he went back from that workout, took like a load of opiates and used like 10 bars of like, I don't know, deep heat cream, had a massage and all this sort of stuff and a nice bath, because that would have wrecked anyone. Like,
oh god, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.